Welcome to the special KT One-on-One. Our guest today is His Excellency Omar Ghobash, Assistant Minister for Culture and Public Diplomacy. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to start with the Abraham Accords. We're seeing a lot of goodwill from both the Israeli and Emirati side. I know that you attended the White House signing ceremony. You've been very active on this front. First of all, I would like to know, personally, you found it surprising seeing how well received the Accords have been.
Yeah, I have to admit that I was a bit surprised at the outpouring of enthusiasm, and one might say even love, that was demonstrated. But it just turns out that there was something quite deeply felt that happened. And I think it says something about the way in which the Emiratis approach the world. We're not looking for a fight with anybody. We're not looking for controversy. We're not looking for conflict. And it also kind of links in with the way in which we've been so open to outsiders being in our society. I think you know that almost, I think it's 85% of the population of the Emirates is foreign. And yet they are regarded very much as sort of residents and part of the Emirati community. So though it was surprising, it was actually a very pleasant surprise that there was so much enthusiasm.
Most recently, we see that there are discussions about creating a quarantine-free corridor between the two countries. We know both Israel and the UAE are leading in the global vaccination effort. What can you share about this agreement, and when do you expect it to go into effect?
It just makes sense that two countries that are so similar in many ways are so far ahead in providing services to their publics, to their populations, that it makes sense that we are neck and neck in the race to provide vaccines to our populations, and that obviously opens up a possibility of creating that corridor. And I think there's almost a kind of a race, a contest. It all happened immediately after the signing of the peace deal, and it's a healthy competition between two great states.
There are also reports late last week about a $10 billion investment in Israel by the UAE. Can you tell us what sectors the UAE will focus on, and also what's the strategy behind this investment?
Right. This is a model that the UAE has used in the past. I believe we have a similar structure for Russia, for China, a slightly smaller one for France, and if I'm not mistaken, India as well. And the idea is that we institutionalize the economic relationship that we have with each other. It also, in this case, the $10 billion would be a commitment to investing $10 billion once the correct deals are presented according to the parameters agreed by both sides. And it allows the Emirates to develop an expertise in the local economy, being able to initially perhaps partner with other investors and other experts, but ultimately being able to actually evaluate the set of opportunities with our own kind of intrinsic or indigenous sources. And it does also signal, because it's a large amount of money, it's a $10 billion investment into a relatively small economy. If you compare the Israeli economy with the Chinese and the Indian and the French, then it's an indication of how important the relationship is, and how much actually we are putting on the economic angle.
Israel recently participated in IDEX, the defense exhibition in Abu Dhabi for the first time.
Yeah.
And following that, we saw news about Israel and the UAE developing anti-drone systems together. So how important is this for the UAE's defense strategy?
Defense is an unfortunate necessity. We live in a topsy-turvy world where there are all kinds of threats, and those threats are becoming increasingly technologically based. It makes sense that two countries with a similar outlook on the region, with a similar desire to protect their populations and develop economically, that they would find common ground on these same defense technologies. We are, in the Emirates, we're engaged in building a complex society and economy that can survive whatever happens in the region. And we see that a similar approach being taken by Israel. We face threats individually or in common, And it's just a fact that we will be able to see eye to eye on certain things and be able to develop similar technologies. Is defense the main kind of thrust of the relationship? Not at all. We're much more interested in the economic diversity and the economic complexity and the sort of enriching the lives of our citizens.
Do you think the common threats regionally are what enabled the Accords to take place? How significant were they, and is this bringing both Israel and the UAE closer together?
So when I said common threats, I was specifically thinking of technological threats. So we were talking about anti-drone technology. There are groups, particularly down in Yemen, the Houthis, who have seem to have access to drone technology, and it is in that context. So
Iran-backed.
Iran-backed. So I was thinking less in terms of geopolitics and more in terms of evolving technologies of war and of aggression. We perhaps may differ in the way we look at Iran from the Israelis. We have a large Iranian population in the UAE. We have a lot of economic ties with the Iranians. And our problem with the Iranians is related to a specific set of fires. As you know, it'll be ballistic missiles, nuclear technology, and their very corrosive influence across the region. All you need to do is look at Lebanon to see what happens when Iran gets involved in the local politics that surround us. Yemen with the Houthis, and Syria and Iraq have been long-standing examples of some of the very poor choices parts of the Iranian government have made. So again, we are interested in developing ties with all of the countries of the region, and our wish for the region is to see governments interested in developing economically and engaging in traditional economic competition with others.
So staying on the topic of regional stability, I mean, we're seeing Saudi Arabian oil sites being targeted recently, spate of attacks on ships that also point to Iranian involvement or its allies. How concerned are you with such incidents, and does the UAE perceive this as a direct threat to its own sovereignty?
I'd say that, look, these incidents are peripheral to the dynamic relations taking place and the dynamic change taking place in the region. If there are rogue elements within the Iranian community that are doing this, well, that's for them to think about. We are observing the relationship, or rather the American outreach to the Iranians with interest, and we've made very clear to our Western and Eastern partners our concerns regarding nuclear technology and our concerns about Iranian behavior. So in the region, every single time there is an incident like the incidents you've mentioned, becomes another reason for the Western community and the Eastern, Russia and China, to reconsider how exactly a relationship with Iran is going to be built. If it is Iranian activity, then it just strengthens the case for a more stringent, a more rigorous treatment of the problem.
There's a new U.S. administration with a new outlook on the Middle East. How is the UAE-U.S. relationship affected, if at all, under a Biden administration?
We have a relationship with the United States, and that's the people of the United States and the parties that alternate in power. We don't change our tune depending on who is in power. The fact is that the Biden administration knows extremely well not just our position on these regional issues, but actually there are many individuals within the Biden team who were part of the Obama team who know our diplomats and our state officials and are very well acquainted with how we see things. We will continue to pursue the Biden administration in explaining how we see things and how continually that actually that there might perhaps be a different negotiating stance from the one currently taken. But that doesn't affect our relationship with the United States, and it doesn't affect our relationship with the administration itself. We work with the administration as it is.
So when it comes to the contentious Iran deal, is the UAE being consulted ahead of potential negotiations?
I'm not sure if consultation is the right term. We are in continual engagement with our American allies. It operates just as any other a relationship does, depending on the enthusiasm and the energy of the diplomats and the officials involved, and the leadership. So we are in continual contact with our American colleagues, and we're continually making it clear that we have a certain position that needs to be taken into account, and that this position is grounded in pragmatism, realism, and is actually broadly held in the region.
Let's move to the topic of gender equality.
Sure.
We recently marked International Women's Day. Now the UAE is requiring at least one female board member in listed companies. This is an important development. It seems to be part of a larger strategy. What can you share with us?
I think this is something that goes back to the founding of the Emirates. The founder of the Emirates, Shahzad bin Sultan Al Nahyan, was always in favor of full participation of women in society, in the economy, and in government work. And with the years and with the spread of educational opportunities, we've seen that actually it's women who have jumped at the educational opportunities in the country. And there was a statistic going back a few years that 70% of university graduates are female. And kind of anecdotally, it comes as no surprise that women are much more focused, much more driven, and much more passionate about work than some of my male colleagues and compatriots. And there is, of course, the broader economic argument, which is women form half the population, and we see that in countries where women are denied access to education or to equal opportunities for work, and where their position is undermined by legal structures, those economies tend to be poorer for it in many different ways. And so I think there is also the economic argument that everybody needs to be a productive member of society, and in that way there is then again the social and emotional kind of health that is promoted as well. Young girls, young boys get to see that their mothers are working, and that then creates a virtuous circle, I think.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your time and insight today.
Thank you very much for